want you to hit me as hard as you can.
Wow. The Batman. Or is it just Batman?
Batmania is in full effect, and if you thought last week was dark, oh boy. Today on DC Revisited, we're getting dark and twisted as we cover Tim Burton's Batman Returns. After the massive success of the original Batman, Warner Brothers was ready to get a new film in production immediately. They even saved the sets at Pinewood Studios, at great cost to them. But wanting to take a bit of a break, Tim Burton went and made Edward Scissorhands as a sort of palate cleanser. The studio decided to move the production from England over to the Warner lot in California to make it a little more appealing. Even still, Burton didn't want to return and was very reluctant. He'd felt he'd already done his Batman film and didn't have anything else to say with the character. Things changed when the studio approached him about making it simply a Tim Burton film. This would allow Burton to really embrace all of his weird tendencies and create something wholly unique. They also demoted Peter Guber and John Peters from producers to executive producers. Burton even asked that Peters be banned from set due to the creative spats he'd had with Tim on the original film. And just like that, Burton was on board. But there was still the question of story. Thanks for watching DC Films Revisited. If you enjoy our shows, please subscribe to our channel right now, like this video, and click on the bell so you can be notified each time a new video comes up. Now, back to the show. Bringing back original screenwriter Sam Hamm, there were already ideas in place for where the film would go. The studio really wanted the Penguin as the main villain, while Burton and Hamm wanted Catwoman. In order to appease both parties, Catwoman and Penguin were both used for the story. Hamm originally devised a script that brought back Vicky Vale and even introduced Dick Grayson's Robin. The main plot would revolve around Catwoman and the Penguin trying to break into the Batcave in order to find secret treasure. Almost feels like an episode of the 60s Batman TV show. Unimpressed with Hamm's script, Burton brought in writer Daniel Waters, who had recently impressed him with Heathers. It was Waters that brought in the Max Schreck character, wanting to show that the true villains of the world don't necessarily wear scary costumes, and instead dress in business suits and act like they're doing what's right. It would also feature the Penguin running for mayor, which, ironically enough, was actually the plot of an old Batman episode. With two different villains, both of whom getting set up with backstories, there was concern over too many characters. Because of this, Vicky Vale, Robin, and Harvey Dent were all removed from the script. Vale was deemed unnecessary since they were setting up the romance between Batman and Catwoman. While Billy D. Williams wanted to return as Dent, Waters didn't feel Harvey worked as Penguin's handler, so he used Max Schreck instead. Robin was requested by the studio and had been featured quite heavily in early drafts. Marlon Wayans was even cast and paid for the role. Despite this, though, they opted to delete his character before filming and save him for future movies. Eventually, Wesley Strick took over scripting duties and was the on-set writer during filming. Burton and Strick decided to focus on the story of Oswald Cobblepot, aka the Penguin, trying to become mayor, while secretly plotting to kill all of Gotham's firstborn sons.
You gotta admit, I played this stinking city like a harp from hell!
Penguin's campaign is funded by corrupt businessman Max Schreck, who attempted to kill his assistant, Selina Kyle. Instead, she's reborn as Catwoman and out for vengeance. Batman is tasked with stopping them all, while a complicated romance forms with Miss Kyle. It's very comic booky and just works. One of the most fascinating aspects that Burton looked to explore was the parallel between Bruce Wayne and Oswald Cobblepot. Both were sons of the Gotham elite, yet have come out of it on complete opposite sides of tragedy. And the main difference between the two appears to be parental love. Bruce has his strong sense of morals and justice because of his parents' guidance. Oswald, on the other hand, was a freak, abandoned by his parents and left to fend for himself. It's not hard to see why one became a hero and the other a villain. It's an intriguing dilemma, but Burton still had to make sure he had the right actors in place to pull it off. Returning to the role of Bruce Wayne in Batman was Michael Keaton. He had won over droves of fans with his performance and was given a significant pay bump to reflect that. But even still, Keaton struggled with returning to the role. Having never taken part in a sequel, he found himself parodying his original performance on the first day of filming. After some reflection, Keaton decided to take on the character like it was his first time. Because of this, his Bruce Wayne feels a little lighter and more playful than previously shown.
Eat floor. High fiber.
Danny DeVito was really the only person considered for the role of the Penguin. Even Water Cooler Talk had him fan cast as the character and was the only actor dictated by the studio. Burton liked the idea and they were off to the races. His depiction is unlike anything seen in the comics. While the Burgess Meredith version of the character presented a more mob boss mentality, DeVito's was a pure psychopath. He kills on a whim and wants brutal vengeance on those who wronged him. This nastiness transferred to his physical appearance, with him almost resembling a penguin with his large nose and flippers. It's a spectacular character design, and it's one of many reasons the Penguin is so memorable.
Why is there always someone who brings eggs and tomatoes to a speech?
Speculation regarding the character had been so rampant, and the production so secretive, that when photos from set were leaked, Warner Brothers hired a private investigator to find out who leaked it. Sounds like something Marvel would do today. The role of Catwoman and her alter ego, Selina Kyle, was originally cast with Annette Bening. Just before production, Bening had to call Burton to inform him that she was pregnant. Given the amount of stunt work, and I mean, look at that costume, she had to be recast. Man, what is it about these Batman love interests? In fact, speaking of Sean Young, she even campaigned for the role, showing up to the producer's offices dressed as the character. She then even appeared on the Joan Rivers show, pleading for the part. Unfortunately, she just wasn't the right person, and they passed. Instead, Michelle Pfeiffer stepped into the skin-tight catsuit and brought about so many iconic moments, all her own. Remember this shot of her whipping the heads off of 4 mannequins? Pfeiffer did this on the first take. She completely owns the role. Her transformation from a meek secretary into the iconic cat burglar is brilliant. Over 60 catsuits were used during the production, and they were constantly tearing. At $1,000 a pop, that didn't come cheap. Her commitment to the role, though, was unwavering. That's a real bird, by the way. Pfeiffer thought the bird puppets looked too fake, so she opted for the real one instead. Total Selina Kyle move. Michael Goff returned to the role of Alfred. He serves the same purpose that he usually does, assisting Bruce. He still provides some of the better moments.
Cold. It's vice-versa. It's supposed to be cold.
But the role still feels a bit shortchanged.
Selina Kyle, you're fired.
Christopher Walken was cast as Max Schreck, the businessman who helped fund Penguin's insane run for mayor. Burton originally wanted David Bowie for the role, but he turned it down in order to appear in Twin Peaks Fire Walk with Me. Burton's main reason for not wanting Walken was pretty simple. He was scared of him. I'd say that scariness certainly lent itself to the role. Paul Rubens appears in the opening as Mr. Cobblepot, Oswald's terrible father. Originally, Burton wanted Burgess Meredith to play the role. Meredith had been the Penguin in the old Adam West Batman series, so it would have been a nice callback. But his declining health prevented him from taking on the role. Pat Hingle returned as Commissioner Jim Gordon, but he continues to have very little to do here. Burton has maligned the pre-production process of this film given that it was a burgeoning franchise. He had meetings with toy executives about characters they were still in the midst of designing. Suddenly, creative decisions were being made in order to satisfy a totally different form of revenue outside of ticket sales. The Batsuit was redesigned, but they kept the general look from the first film intact. They replaced the human anatomy of the armor with a more Art Deco style. They also aimed to make it slightly more functional for Keaton and his stunt double. These slight changes are all over the movie, even with the Batmobile getting a major transformation in the second act. Production designer Anton Furst was unable to return despite having won an Oscar for the first because of contractual obligations. Bo Welch replaced him and further solidified Gotham City's weird dystopic feel. But where Furst went for dingy and drab with a little more of a noir flair, Welch utilized a whole palette of colors in order to give the world texture, and it really works. The Christmas aesthetic mixed with the more circus look of the Red Triangle Gang make the film stand out even 30 years later. The journey across the snowy, abandoned zoo, only to reveal that it's Penguin's lair, is pure genius. Of course that's where his base would be. One of the most memorable visuals of the film is the army of penguins that descend upon Gotham. The production wanted king penguins, but they were only domesticated in one area of England, so they had to be flown over to the United States and housed in cold facilities. But even still, penguins are just animals, and weren't able to do much outside of march. So anytime you see someone interacting with the penguins, it's a puppet. Mixing animatronics with little people in suits, Stan Winston provided some truly amazing visual effects. Hilariously enough, the movie even makes fun of something that had really annoyed fans in the previous film.
Security? Who let Vicky Vale into the Batcave? I'm sitting there working and I turn around, there she is. Oh, hi Vic, come on in.
This kind of self-awareness felt unheard of at the time. The studio was even aware that the Catwoman character would be huge for them. Wonder why. So they spent $500,000 for a last-minute reshoot. See, originally Catwoman's fate was much more ambiguous, but the studio wanted to make it more clear that she survived the whole ordeal. Plus, they felt it would tie in with the ending of the first. After loads of stress on the creative team, the new ending was inserted just before release. Danny Elfman returned to score the music, and it feels even grander than his previous work. As a result of Burton having more creative control, there was no Prince music, and instead a single song by Susie and the Banshees, titled Face to Face, was produced for the film. You can hear parts of the song during the huge masquerade ball, but it's featured significantly less than Prince was.
Bruce Wayne, why are you dressed up like Batman?
Because he is Batman, you moron.
Batman Returns released to theaters on June 19th, 1992, and brought in $45 million during its opening weekend. This was slightly better than the previous film, but the reaction was very polarizing. It was deemed to be too dark, and not what a comic book movie should be in their eyes. Which I suppose is understandable since the opening of the film involves a cat being murdered and parents throwing their baby into a river. Not exactly lighthearted family fun. This resulted in a smaller box office than the first film, bringing in $266 million worldwide. Groups of parents opposed the film due to its dark nature, saying it was still being marketed towards children despite its tone. And there's some truth to this, as there was a McDonald's tie-in promotion that featured the Penguin, whose image is pretty frightening. But the studio just pointed to the film's rating. Putting it on Happy Meals still seemed questionable though. While they did continue the trend of novelizations, Returns wasn't quite as successful as its predecessor, unable to crack the New York Times bestsellers list. In terms of home video releases, Batman Returns was a massive success on both VHS and Laserdisc. Unfortunately, the last time Warner really did anything with the movie was way back in 2005. Even the most recent 4K release is simply a reskin of their prior features. Given the recent landscape of comic book movies, it'd be interesting to see a more modern retrospective look from the cast and creators. I'd regret it if I made it through the Burton Batman films without talking about its tremendous influence on Batman the Animated Series. With a score by Danny Elfman, they really take a lot of inspiration from Burton, while able to dive deeper into the comic book origins. It's often considered the gold standard for Batman media, and it wouldn't have been possible without Burton's Batman films. Michael Keaton will be appearing in the upcoming film The Flash alongside Ezra Miller. He's going to be appearing in the Batsuit, so the question now is whether it's the '89 version or the Art Deco one from Returns. Either way, it should be a sight to behold. While Michelle Pfeiffer never returned to the DC universe, she is currently appearing in the MCU as the original Wasp, Janet Van Dyne, in Ant-Man. And I mean, we did get Danny DeVito as Man-Spider, so I guess that's something. While none of the main cast may have appeared in any other DC work, you may recognize one of Penguin's clowns. That's Doug Jones. You may recognize him as the creature from The Shape of Water, Abe Sapien from Hellboy, or even one of the best Buffy villains ever. But he's also appeared as Deathbolt in the CW's Arrowverse. While Tim Burton's Batman Returns was darker than most expected, it's that unique tone that really helps it stand out. Whether you prefer this one or the first, a certain quality exists in Burton's Batman that dissipates with his absence. Batman has never been darker, weirder, and ultimately more fun than what's presented here. With Burton's darker vision resulting in less revenue than expected, a more commercial approach was being discussed by the studio. But that's a story for next time.
Exactly.
Join us, same movie time, same movie channel.